Hey guys, and welcome to Gwent, the Witcher card game. My name is Jaggerus, and today I've got my last beginner deck for you guys, and that is the Scoia'tael beginner Dwarves deck that you can see here. And we're going to be using the leader Bruvurhug. I really like Bruvurhug in this deck. You need to unlock him by doing the challenges for Scoia'tael. I did them with my beginner weather monster deck. You can find a guide for beginner weather monster on this channel, as well as a video of me doing the challenges with that deck on this channel. So if you're interested in how that turned out and how you too can do it, then do check out the video. But Bruvurhug, first and foremost, he is a dwarf. So having a leader that's also a dwarf is nice for dwarf synergies. And when you play him, he allows you to play a silver unit from your deck and shuffle the others back. So not a silver special card, a silver unit. And you'll notice that we do have a few silver units in this deck. What this means is that when you're doing your mulligan, just be aware that, you know, if you have 3 silver units in your hand, you can afford to mulligan one of them because you can target draw it later on with Bruvurhug. So we'll start, as always, with our golden cards. And if you don't know by now, we have the 4 starter ones for Scoia'tael. That is Royal Decree Special. Play a gold card from your deck, shuffle the others back. So this is targeted draw for a gold card. Once you start to build up your collection and you have a few more legendaries, this is the card that I would swap out first, because the Dwarves deck isn't reliant on a very specific gold card in order to function properly. So you can swap this out for a card that's kind of better. Like, you don't really need targeted gold draw in this deck. Next, we have Geralt. Geralt is a 10 strength card, but he has Brave. So Brave triggers when you deploy him, and it adds his points to your total. If once he's been deployed and his 10 points have been added, you're losing still, then it will trigger the ability on the card. So in this case, he'll be strengthened by 3. So if you're losing by 11 or more, Geralt becomes a 13 strength unit rather than a 10 strength unit. Next up, we have Triss Marigold. Deploy damage a unit by 5, so you can use this to remove problematic cards on your opponent's side, or if your opponent plays a problematic card on your own side, you can actually use this to damage your own cards. It's not, you know, always useful to damage your own cards, but it is situationally useful, so that's something to just be aware of with Triss, because if you didn't realize, you could have, like, helped yourself and not known about it. Last up, we have Scoia'tael, the dragon, and when you play her, she boosts herself by 1 for each dwarf ally, including golds. And you may have noticed this deck has a heck of a lot of dwarf allies, so she should boost herself by a decent amount. And if you have elves, she'll damage an enemy by the number of elf allies that you have. Now, we do have a couple of elves in this deck down here, but primarily we're using the dwarf mechanic of Scoia'tael. So next up, we have Dennis Cranmer. This is the 1 silver card I've swapped into this deck. So I took out Dudu. You can find him in here. Dudu is a starter silver card where when you play him, choose an enemy and you copy its power. But I feel like it's a bit too situational. Like, ideally, you need them to have 1 enemy that's really, really strong. And even then, copying its power means that, you know, you're only catching up to that level. You're not overtaking them necessarily. The other problem with Dudu, I find, is that if you do that and you catch up to their strong unit, you then can't Scorch because you'll Scorch yourself. So I swap him out in all of my beginner decks. So we have Dennis. He's also a dwarf, which is nice. And we can target draw him with Bruvurhug. This is basically the card we're going to target draw with Bruvurhug, because when you play him, he strengthens all other dwarfs in your deck, hand, and on your side of the board by 1. So all of your other dwarfs get buffed. And this is a really nice option because obviously we have a lot of dwarfs, so that's putting a lot of strength into our decks. Then we also have Cleaver, who is a dwarf, and he will toggle a unit's lock. So a locked unit's ability doesn't trigger. So if you have a unit which has an ability, for example, that happens, you know, each turn or happens on a delay, locking that unit will stop it. It's basically like a silence. Now, if an opponent locks one of the units you have, then you can unlock it with Cleaver. But basically, in this situation, Cleaver will be used to, you know, stop a problematic card on your opponent's side from happening, because all of our other cards kind of, their effects trigger when you play them, so there's nothing to silence, basically. Next up with our silver units, we have Barkley Elves. Deploy. Play a random dwarf from your deck, including golds, boost it by 3. So this is a nice little card. It target draws a dwarf and then gives it 3 points, so this is nice. Basically, it's just, you know, deck thinning, getting more dwarfs on the board to help with your dwarf synergies, and it's worth a decent number of points. Then we have our 3 special silver cards. We have Scorch, destroy the highest units. Warning, if the highest unit is your unit, then Scorch is going to kill your unit, so that's just something worth being aware of, basically. If you have a strong unit, then Scorch is likely to target you. And this is actually a card I would swap out of this deck sooner rather than later. I've included it because it's a beginner card, sorry, and I like it more than Dudu. But ultimately, you know, there's lots of good silver dwarf units like Yarp and Zergan. Resilient means that he'll stay on the board for an extra round. So he stays on the board the round that you play him, and then into one after. So if you play him on the first round, he'll be there for the first and second round, but he loses his resilience when he stays on the board, so you can't keep them for 3 rounds. But this is a card that, you know, stays on the board, so you can spend your time boosting it, for example, and also whenever a ally is played, he gets boosted. So, you know, he's a really nice dwarf synergy card that you could swap in. Similarly, Sheldon Skaggs, deploy, move all units on the row to random rows on the same side, effort, boost self by 1. So you can basically use him to move units out of weather is the idea. And again, he is a dwarf, so fits with the synergy and fits with Brotherhook. So with Scorch, that's one that I would maybe look to switch out. Next up, we have Commander's Horn, boost 5 adjacent units by 4. And boosting units in this deck is really useful because we have these 3 Mahakam defenders, which are resilient like Yarpen, which means they'll stay on the board for an extra round. So if you can boost them and give them a lot of points, you can carry a lot of points into a future round, which is, you know, really nice. Next up, we have Decoy. Decoy allows us to replay an ally. You return it to your hand and strengthen it by 3. And this is useful, for example, if someone locks one of your Mahakam defenders, which means it won't stay on the board. If they lock it nice and early, you can just decoy it, and that'll regain its resilience. Otherwise, you can decoy, you know, one of your other bronze units. All of these units work nicely with decoy. And even actually Dennis Cranmar, you can decoy Dennis Cranmar and strengthen all your dwarfs twice. So that is a really nice strategy if you happen to have the cards in hand. So that's also something worth being aware of with decoy. So moving on to our bronzies. Like I say, we have our Mahakam defenders, and then we have our Mahakam guards. Deploy, boost an ally by 3. If it's a dwarf, such as a Mahakam defender, boost it by 5. So we're going to use these to make our Mahakam defenders stronger and try and keep them on the board. And when boosting our defenders, ideally we want to boost like a couple of them and have them at different levels of strength, so that then if someone does Scorch or remove one of your defenders, you know, you have options in terms of protecting the other one. So don't just boost all of your points onto one if you happen to have 2, because that's a bit of a risky strategy. We have the Dwarven Skirmishers. Deploy, damage an enemy by 3. If the unit was not destroyed, boost self by 2. So this is a little bit of removal if there happens to be enemy units that, you know, aren't very strong that you want to remove. The Dwarven Skirmisher is really nice for that. But also, if you just want to whittle away a little bit of health, he'll then get boosted by 2. So he's basically worth 10 points because, you know, you do 5 base strength, boost by 2 plus 3 damages is basically a 10-point change. Similarly to the Mahakam Guards, which are also a 10-point change. So you can see there's quite a decent amount of tempo in this deck. Then we have our Hawker Healers. These are our 2 elves, but what these do is they boost the 2 units to the right by 3. And wouldn't it be convenient if we place these to the left of, say, a Mahakam Guard? That is a, you know, a convenient strategy there to boost them and keep those points till the next round. Now, something to bear in mind, obviously, is we have a lot of melee units, and we are quite vulnerable to weather. Fortunately for ourselves, we have a couple of First Lights in this deck, which can spawn Clear Skies or Rally. Clear Skies trigger all weather on your side, then clear weather from your side. Rally, play a random bronze unit from your deck. So this is nice because if you draw it and there's no weather, you can still use it to just play a random bronze card, so it's always got value. And if you feel like, for example, you need more weather removal, you could always swap out, say, a Dwarven Skirmisher for an extra First Light just to have the increased chance of drawing them if you find like weather is becoming, you know, more of a problem as you play this deck. It depends what you go up against, really. Next up, we have Swallow Potion, boost a unit by 8. And I've chosen to only include one of these because I feel like boosting unit by 8 just is asking for someone to damage it, right? So we've put 1 Swallow Potion in, which boosts a unit by 8. And I've put 1 Immune Boost in, which boosts 3 adjacent units by 3, and then adds 3 armor to them. So this technically gives you more points. This can give you up to 9, whereas this only gives you 8. And this gives you armor. But this is single target, which means if you only happen to have 1 Mahakam defender, you know, you're going to be keeping more points into the next round. So that's why I've got 1 of each, because I feel like, you know, having them is pretty nice. In terms of cards you could maybe sub into this deck, we have Golden Dwarfs, like we have Zoltan Chevet, for example. When you play him, you move 3 units to this row on their side if their allies strengthen them by 2. So you can use this to remove units from weather, for example. Or try and stack them on a different row. And I always recommend Igni as the one legendary card you should craft. If you're going to craft 1 legendary card, this is the one. It fits into any deck. Destroy the highest units on the opposite row if that row totals 20 or more power. So if the row stacks up to more than 20, it will destroy the strongest unit or units if there's a tie on that row. So often you can get a very large amount of value out of Igni. And I just recommend it because it's just such a strong card. And it's one that you need to kind of learn about early on, because otherwise people are going to use it against you, basically. Other options, some people like to use Quen Sign. Quen Sign, choose a unit in your hand, give all copies of it in your hand and deck a shield, and boost them by 2. So you could use Quen Sign onto a Mahakam Defender, and that means that the first time people try and damage them, which they will do, it's protected. But the problem with that is you have to draw a Quen Sign before you draw a guard. Once you've Quen Signed the defenders, any extra Quens that you draw aren't that useful. I guess you could use them to protect some of your other dwarfs, but, you know, who's going to be targeting these when they can target those? And also, I feel like because Quen Sign doesn't actually give you any points the turn that you play it, it kind of makes you lose tempo a little bit, which I find can be quite costly if you're trying to kind of maintain points with your opponent, for example. So I don't really recommend it, but I know some people like to use it, and if you want to play around with it, you know, feel free. Anyway, guys, if you like this deck, do hit that thumbs up button. I'm going to jump into a game now and showcase this deck in action.
Nothing like a dwarf to get you to a tight spot.
Okay, so up against Eredin, which means if we see any first lights in this deck, we definitely want to hang on to them. There's one there, for example. On top of that, we want to find our Mahakam Defenders, and as you can see, we've actually got a couple of those. And the last thing we want to do is make sure that we don't have all 3 of our silver cards in hand. And actually, in terms of a starting hand, this one, not too bad. Not too bad at all. I'm actually going to mulligan the Scorch, I think. Scorch, like I say, it's situationally useful, but, you know, when you can get a silver golden card instead, you know, a little bit better. We actually have a decent amount of boosting in this situation. We have the Hawker Healer, we have the Mahakam Defender, we have the Mahakam Defender, we've got a Guard, so this isn't too bad, all things told. So actually, I think we're just going to kind of stick with what we have. We have an immune boost, for example, and then just kind of go into the game here. So what are you going to do, Eredin? So Wild Hunt Riders are a little bit annoying because at the round end, if they're still on the board, then it gains resilience, and resilient units are a pain in the butt, but it is what it is. We're going to play our leader, and we'll throw him out, and then we'll pull out our Dennis Cranmer, pop him down. And actually, I should have played the Bruverhoog on the middle row, because typically we stack the front row and back row, and having a row highly stacked is risky, whereas if you put Bruverhoog in the middle row, you wouldn't be susceptible to things like Igni as easily.
Resistance is futile.
You shot my dwarf. That's freaking rude. Anyway, we're gonna play Barkley now, I think. And we got another Mahakam Defender. So that's actually all of our Mahakam Defenders, which is really nice to have in hand, because this is gonna start setting us up into a really nice position, basically. It's interesting that he made that unit resilient when, if he'd lost the round, this unit would be resilient anyway because of Brave. So a bit of a strange choice, all things told, because we don't intend to lose this round. We'll throw out another Mahakam Defender, and I'm just spacing them out slightly. Like, the risk is, obviously, if I put them close together, that they might get targeted by things. But as it is, he's actually just passed, so we can choose to pass here. We'll keep these 2 on the board. He's keeping a 6, which I guess is good. And we'll go into the next round. So we lose our resilience, but the thing is we have, you know, another Mahakam Defender here, and we got a second first light as well, which is quite nice. So now we get to mulligan, and the question is, do we get rid of one of the first lights on the off chance that we could get rid of one of the first lights on the off chance that he doesn't play Weather? But I feel like that's probably quite risky. I think, you know what, we're going to stick with this hand. I think this is actually quite a nice hand to have. We've got, you know, another Mahakam Defender to pop down and gain resilience for. We've got some boosting, we've got locking, we've got, you know, dwarf synergies. So all in all, we're in a nice spot. So I'll pop this guy down. We'll put him over here, just far away from this 9-1 that he's likely to target. Okay, so it looks like he's going to go for the trio strategy, which is actually okay. We have a lock in hand, so I'm not too worried about this. I'm going to immune boost my 3 dwarfs here. This will give them 3 points and some armor, which just makes them a little bit kind of safer. He's going to use Eredin, there we go, to pull a Wild Hunt Rider. And out it comes. And this is annoying for us because now they all get basically buffed when they're all in a trio. But I don't know if locking a unit stops the trio from happening. This is kind of the question that I have. If I lock this, will it
I'm a dwarf of
will it stop that from happening? And what we may have to do here is just Royal Decree, not Royal Decree, First Light, and try and find our, there's Weather. I was going to say First Light and try and find our rally, but as it is, we're going to just clear skies. We've got a second one, so removing this frost isn't really, you know, too much of a worry for us. So yeah, look, it looks like locking one of the units actually stops the trio from happening. So this is really nice for us. We no longer have to worry about that. He's got foglets in his hand, which he doesn't really want because they're meant to get summoned when he plays fog. But what we have is, we'll put him there, a Hawker Healer. And that was a bit risky because this guy's now 12. So I actually probably should have put that one to the left because we're very open to a Scorch here.
If I must.
He's got Doo-Doo. He's going to put that into a 12, which isn't really a problem for us, to be honest. We'll play out our Mahakam Guard now. And we'll buff the Defender by 5. Because obviously this is staying on the board. And if we're keeping 17 points, you know, that's pretty good. As it is, though, he's going to be keeping, you know, quite a few points here. He's going to be keeping 21. So that's just something to be, you know, aware of, basically. 57 to 52. So I think what we can do now is say Synthesis. She's going to deal 1 damage, which is nice. And we'll deal damage to one of his... Wild Hunt Riders, because obviously they're getting kept on the board, and so damaging them is going to be in our interest, because, well, actually, if we win the round, they're not getting kept on the board, because we'll have 2-0'd him, now that I think about it. And there it is. I was like, they're going to get kept on the board, because after we win this round, like, we'll go into a 3rd round, but that doesn't happen. And there you can kind of see the sheer power of Dwarf boosting, and just kind of how... you know, nasty it can be, keeping those, like, high numbers of points on the board. And I think he gave us the first round too easily. You could tell that he wanted to play the Wild Hunt Riders and keep them on the board for 3 rounds. He misplayed his resilience because he didn't need to make that unit resilient. Like, he didn't need to make the Wild Hunt Rider resilient, because if he lost the round, it was going to be resilient anyway. And if he intended to pass like that, you know, not the smartest of plays. But... as it is, beginner dwarfs, I think it's a really nice deck for new players. I think it's a very easy deck to navigate, and it has a lot of answers for the kind of things that other beginner decks will throw at you. Anyway, guys, it seems like we have enough ore to open a pack, so we're going to end once again on a pack opening, and hope that we get beginner's luck, because we did just showcase a beginner's deck, so I definitely think a little bit of beginner's luck should be with us here. So let's open this keg and see what we can find. What we got? Show me what you got. Okay, we got 4 whites. It's going to be 4 whites and a blue. But we did get a premium white, so, you know, that's nice. Oh, it was 4 whites and a blue. So, here, I would suggest taking Imperial Golem. It's really nice in Nilfgaard. Basically, you can use it to buff your leader ability by 9 points. Next, Wild Hunt Navigator, and then Madraim. So, I'm going to actually grab a Madraim here, though, just because... I open quite a lot of kegs, and if I have 2 of this and 2 of this, it means that if either of them come up again, it's not a wasted pick. So, but that's what I recommend. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this beginner deck series. Let me know in the comments below what other decks you'd like me to showcase. And if you enjoyed this video, hit that thumbs up button. Have a fantastic day. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.